There he was, with his glowing yellow eyes, like jewels. He was feeling my mom like two lovers would. I could tell she didn't want it by how stiff and silent she was laying there next to him. Then I felt my arm tug hard away from the door. "Maya, you gotta know your boundaries, okay? And respect other people's." It was breakfast when I noticed it, as I studied my mom and my uncle. I looked at where she looked, which was always away from him and never at or in his eyes. But his eyes? They bounced around, paying attention to my cousins with care and love, to my grandma with admiration and warmth, but in a slight moment of silence. In that moment, when my mother's fears heightened until I thought she'd suffocate, his eyes always drifted back to her neck, to her thighs. The way his eyes narrowed in on her made her slump down like a guilty toddler. All I did was watched and watched and watched, in great, dumbstruck awe. Mother suggested we play outside, and off we ran, but my uncle grabbed me, saying, "Wait." I felt shivers in the most mad of places on my body, and a strange chill of mistrust went up my spine as my tiny hand accepted his. And he walked out slowly with me until we settled in a dark hallway, dusty and obscure from everyone else. He stood there towering over me, his black bathrobes like the cloak of a foul demon, and then, "Your mommy needs help, and I'm helping her. But if you tell other people, I can't help her, okay? You want her to get better, right?" I nodded. I nodded like a lapdog that's learned some tricks. I ran outside, in a state I can never describe, nor do I want to return to. My mind was racing with fear, but also a weird excitement. In my stupor, staring out at my cousins on the playground, I ran to them. And I tried to play with them. But I remember all our confusion. I started grabbing my cousins too. I'd pin them down, I'd tell them I wanted to help them. We'd wrestle and wrestle in what I thought was glorious fun. They'd scream, I'd scream, they'd stomp away in the grass to run and squeal. Not a single sound unfamiliar to the playground. Then I realized what was happening. I thought I was playing with them, but I wasn't. As my cousins scratched me and made me let them go, I realized I was becoming my uncle. If anyone could tell you what was running through my mind, what feeling was coursing through my veins, maybe it'd only be my uncle who'd have a way to describe it. I've completely blocked the experience. The next night, I heard a thumping sound, like a bookshelf had fallen, but rhythmic, consistent, and beastly. I walked upstairs with the sound getting crisper and louder. I heard my uncle from the sultry baritone hum of his heaving. With long bouts of silence in between, I'd hear my mom cry out like a cat. I listened for as long as I could, though I felt no joy, no fascination. I peered into the room again, and this time, I saw. At breakfast, my uncle kept me alert. If he raised a hand, my heart skipped a number of beats as I dared him to make any move towards my mom. I decided, instead of playing with my cousins, I would speak to my mom and ask her what was going on. She must have never been asked anything like that before, as her eyes widened. Tears formed in the corners of her reddened eyes as she grabbed me, and for some reason, I was scared of the touch of my own mother. But I let her anyway. She hugged me and said that she'll protect me. If only I wasn't such a confused coward. I could have told her that she's the one who needs to protect herself. I wanted us to come here, and I never saw what my mom was going through. Some days, I still can't forgive myself. But on that day, I couldn't just stand there and not do something about it. That night, I hid in the closet of my uncle's room. I brought my phone with me along with a portable battery charger. I was ready. I felt my emotions wanting to take over, but I convinced myself to remain calm and to remember my purpose for all of this. My uncle came in and prepared the bed. It was a strange scene for him. He'd light candles, he'd make the bed, then he'd breathe. There was a sense that he had made a ritual out of this experience. Then he walked out and moments later brought in my mother, her arm locked tightly into his. He was smiling, but she wasn't. I peered through the tiny crack in the closet where she became a zombie, completely mindless. He began touching her face. He began running his hand across her, almost as if they were lovers. He put his face into her, burying himself in the bends of her body. That's when I started recording. I don't think there was enough light, but I didn't know what else to do. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but I had to keep them stable for the video recording as I witnessed it all. As he walked closer to the candle, I captured his face on video. I spent that night in the closet, completely awake, replaying everything I had just saw. While my uncle slept and snored, I could hear my mom in her sadness. I wanted to reach out and hug her so badly, but even if I was able to, it didn't seem like the right time when everything was so twisted. That night, I heard her cry herself to sleep all alone, and I knew this had to stop. The morning after, I showed the video to my grandma. Grandma, who was reluctant, handed the phone back to me as she watched the video. Her eyes widened, confronted by the truth of the sounds of my mother and the images of my uncle's guilty actions. Then, reluctant, she handed the phone back again to me. Then she picked up the landline and dialed. She, very nonchalantly, said a few things into the mouthpiece, and then a few minutes later, the police showed up. That was it. Years later, I found my uncle's presents hidden in the closet of my room. Now I'm 14 years old, and I finally brought myself to throw those presents away without ever having opened them. My mom's still acting strange. I doubt anyone could ever completely heal from something like that. But at least when I go to hug her now, her first instinct isn't to shiver away, but to learn again the warm touch of another human being.